He has kept it for so long, that secret which, although hidden, ran through his veins like a slow poison, infiltrating every day of his life. Perhaps it was the fear of losing everything, perhaps the insecurity that a single word could destroy the fragile balance he had built with his own hands. He never dared to tell. Never. And the weight of it, although silent, already dominated him completely. You may not realize it, but there is a mysterious force in everything that is not said, everything that hides in the shadows of the mind, everything that does not manifest but remains so vivid in those who keep it. A secret is more than just an unrevealed piece of information. It is a silent flame that burns, a pressure that grows until there is no more space to hold it. Have you ever wondered what happens when the unspoken truth finally comes out? Like a dammed river, it cannot be contained forever. And he knew that. He knew that one day, sooner or later, the secret would reveal itself, not by his choice, but because the very nature of truth demands it. And when that happens, everything will change, everything. He looked at the people around him, at those he loved, at those with whom he shared the most precious moments of life. But inside, there was something that separated them, something that made them distant, even though they were physically close. That secret, that weight, that unspoken truth raised an invisible barrier. He saw the smile on the face of those beside him, but there was something there that was unseen, something that remained only in his soul. He felt, more than anything, fear. The fear of being exposed, of seeing everything he had cultivated crumble like a house of cards. He often wondered if the truth was really worth revealing. What would he lose if he told it? What would he gain? Would it be possible to continue living, breathing, existing with that truth finally exposed? Or would it be the end, a definite end, with no return? The most painful part, perhaps, was knowing that the truth never really belonged to him. He had not chosen the moment to keep it. It had been imposed not by his own hands, but by circumstances he could not control. And yet, he was the only one responsible for it, the only one who carried it, the only one who lived with it. He tried not to think about it, but with each passing day, the weight increased, and the silence became more and more deafening. Maybe you have felt it too. The weight of something unsaid, the silent pain that grows inside you when you cannot share something profound with someone, when you need to protect yourself from another's gaze to avoid the truth dragging you into a bottomless abyss. I know you must have felt that weight, and if not yet, it will come, because we all keep something. But what about when the truth finally reveals itself? When the person holding the secret finds themselves without the strength to endure it, with no other option but to let it out into the world? The explosion is inevitable. It's not a matter of if, but when. He knew the moment had come, the moment when the accumulated tension would become unbearable. The big question was, how would it happen, when, how, where? He didn't know, but the feeling was there, undeniable, like a storm about to break over him and everything around him. He tried to resist, tried to hold back the wave, but it was impossible. He felt the chill of truth on his skin, the inevitability of something that would change everything. I can't take it anymore, he thought, but if he said it, if he spoke, the consequences would be profound. What could he do? With each passing moment, he felt the weight increase, and a part of his soul was dying slowly. But at the same time, he knew that somehow that death was necessary. Only then could life be reborn anew. He was no longer the same. He could no longer look at himself in the mirror and see that calm face without scars, without marks. The secret had transformed him. He was no longer who he was before, and in a way, he didn't know who he would become after telling the truth. Something inside him had been broken, but perhaps that was necessary. Perhaps that was what he needed to find true freedom. Have you ever had a moment like this, when you knew something big was about to happen, when the silence was so loaded with tension that it could no longer be ignored? Comment here if you have ever experienced something like this. The words finally began to come out. He was about to speak. He was about to reveal everything. It was as if a greater force was pushing him toward that moment. He knew that nothing would ever be the same. He knew everything would change, but he also knew that, although fear consumed him, this was the only way out, the only way to regain peace. He took a deep breath. He looked at the person beside him, seeing the confused expression on their face. He knew this would change the lives of everyone around him. He knew there was no turning back. And yet the feeling of relief was already starting to invade his chest, as if finally he would be seen, as if finally he could exist without the weight of the secret. But at the same time, he wondered, would the words be enough? Or would the consequences be even greater than he imagined? When the truth comes out, it doesn't go back. And he already knew that. The game was about to change, and the great turnaround was right in front of him. Nothing would be the same as before. Those around him, those who believed they knew who he was, would be in shock. But at the same time, he knew that, deep down, everyone was living a lie. He was the reflection of what everyone kept inside. He was the reflection of a world full of secrets, a world that until that moment he had helped to sustain. The tension was in the air, and he felt it with every breath, with every beat of his heart. He felt the truth approaching like a hurricane, and he knew there was no way to avoid it anymore. He was afraid, yes, but more than fear, there was a certainty. The certainty that life, even with its obstacles, could not be more fulfilling without that truth being revealed. He then closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the pain, the tension, the fear, all of it mixing together. And in a deep breath, he prepared to say the words that would change everything, the words that would finally break the invisible chains that bound him. He could no longer be a prisoner of the secret. He knew he was about to set himself free, but was he ready for the consequences? The answer to that question is closer than he imagines. Are you also ready for the truth you hold? I feel that there is something in you that has yet to be said, something that is waiting to be revealed. If you feel this, comment below. Share with me. He knew that nothing could prepare him for the impact of his words. Something inside him rebelled against the idea that what he would say could destroy everything he had built. But, on the other hand, another part of his soul longed for freedom, for a silent redemption that only the truth could bring. He no longer knew where fear ended and courage began. Perhaps the two had fused in a strange way, becoming inseparable. The pressure in his chest did not ease. On the contrary, it increased. It was as if the air around him was compressing, making the atmosphere ever denser. Each second, each breath, each heartbeat brought him closer to the moment when there would be no turning back. He felt it intensely, as if the entire universe was somehow awaiting his decision. The truth he harbored was not just his. It bore the weight of everyone around him. He looked into the eyes of the person standing before him, and something inside him shuddered. What he saw there was not a familiar face. It was an expression loaded with expectations, with trust, with something that until then he had never had the courage to break. The lie, the silence that had formed between them, had become a wall, and now he was the only one responsible for tearing it down. The person in front of him did not know what he was hiding, but somehow she sensed that something was wrong. The weight of her gaze made him feel that the lie was more than a secret. It was an unbearable burden. How long will I be able to keep going like this? He thought. How long can I live by lies, even though these lies were meant to protect? Protect whom? Protect what? He already knew the answer. The lie was not meant to protect anyone. It was solely to protect himself, and it was corroding him slowly day after day. He knew that true freedom would only come when he finally broke free from what was holding him back. But what he didn't know was that by releasing the truth, he would not only free himself but also those around him. Because the lie did not exist in isolation. It was a network, an invisible web that affected everyone on some level. He could feel it and felt a bitter compassion for those who also carried their own secrets, who, like him, saw themselves as prisoners of their own shadows. He could not wait any longer. The moment to speak was before him, and he felt it in his flesh like an urgency, like a vital necessity. He could no longer lose himself in excuses or justifications. What he was keeping needed to be said, not just for him, but for all those who, in some way, found themselves imprisoned by the fear of what the truth might bring. The words began to form in his mind, taking shape, gaining structure. But when he thought about uttering them, a cruel doubt paralyzed him for a moment. Was he ready? Was he? What would he lose? What would he gain? And more importantly, what would he cause by revealing what was hidden? His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Fear surrounded him, but he knew he could not hide from it any longer. It's now, he thought, and in that moment he understood that fear would never disappear, but it could be conquered. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the ability to act despite it, and that's how he prepared himself to reveal the secret. He took a deep breath, as if he were preparing to dive into unknown waters. The tension in the air was palpable. The weight of the truth was upon him, but now he no longer feared it. He didn't know how it would all end, but he knew that from that moment on, he would never be the same. He was about to make a decision that would change everything around him, transform his life, his relationships with others, and especially with himself. I need to say this. I need to break this silence. And then he spoke. The first word was like a breath in the silence, and the second followed quickly after, and another, and another. Once he started, he couldn't stop. The truth poured out of his mouth like an avalanche that couldn't be contained. The words, finally released, filled the space around them, invading the atmosphere with a force over which he had no control. It was a silent but devastating explosion. Every syllable had the power to rebuild or destroy. He felt the tension dissipate, but at the same time the fear increased. What had he just done? What did this mean for their future? For him? For everyone? And at that moment he realized that although the truth had been freed, the consequences were inevitable. Nothing would ever be the same again. But there was something he felt deep in his heart, something that perhaps he could only fully understand after some time. By releasing his truth, he had finally freed himself. And from that moment on, he knew that no matter how difficult it might be, the path of honesty was the only possible path. The secret no longer controlled him. He had broken the invisible chains that bound him. Can you feel it? The pain of the secret transforming into liberation? Believe me, we all carry something inside us that needs to be said. Something that, if released, can change everything. Comment here if you've ever experienced something like this. Share with me what you carry inside you. But what now? What happens after the truth is revealed? The game has changed. And perhaps the next step will be even more difficult than what he just faced. He now has to deal with the consequences. And the consequences, oh, they will come. Maybe not immediately, but they will come. And he doesn't know if he's prepared. But he knows one thing, there's no going back. He knew that what he had just done would not have an easy return. The truth, once set free, cannot be contained again. It spreads like a fire, touching everything in its path, transforming and destroying, rebuilding and healing. What he released now would not only change how people around him perceived things, but it would also alter how he saw himself. The silence after the explosion of words was profound. The space between them was charged with a tangible tension. He looked into the eyes of the person in front of him, trying to read the reaction, trying to understand what she was feeling, but it was impossible. Nothing there seemed real. It was as if reality was fragmented, about to collapse. He didn't know what to expect, but he felt that something much bigger was happening at that moment. He had taken the first step, but the path ahead was murky and full of uncertainties. That feeling of helplessness, of not knowing what would come next, surrounded him. The fear so present before now seemed like a distant shadow, replaced by the unpredictability of what was to come. The truth released, as liberating as it was, also brought a new weight, that of dealing with the consequences, and he knew they would come with a force he could not foresee. However, something inside him already felt lighter. Something inside him began to understand that the necessary sacrifice to live authentically was profound, but that in some way he would be at peace with himself. There was still much to be said, much to be resolved. But that moment was the key. He knew that from now on nothing would be the same, and with that, his heart began to calm. The truth didn't need to be perfect. It didn't need to please everyone. It just needed to be, because in the end, it was the only thing he could control, and that, in itself, was enough. Now he waited. That silence, laden with meaning, would be broken soon, and he knew that, regardless of what happened, he had done the only thing he could do to set himself free. And maybe deep down, that was all he needed to find his peace. Have you ever reached the point where you had no choice but to release something you had been holding on to? Comment here. I know that if you've read this far, you understand the weight of carrying a secret. This journey doesn't end here. If you felt touched by this story, if something inside you awakened, the next step is right over there. Come with me and continue exploring the truths that often imprison us. Click here, and don't let this reflection stop here. I'll be waiting for you there.